Frankenstein is one of the most popular horror, if not just general stories of all time. In its 200-year history, it's had so many adaptations between the Universal monster movies, plenty of sequels, the monster itself, or creature as we're going to be calling it in this video, appearing in plenty of things like Hotel Transylvania, the Fate series of course, among other things for children and adults all around the world. But recently, we've had an adaptation of Frankenstein in 2025 by Guillermo del Toro that I think really encapsulates not only the director's own unique style, but really hijacks the story in a way that makes a theme about fatherhood. Now, the theme of fatherhood, and especially nature versus nurture, has always been an important theme in the original novel, but as you'll see in our section going over the book comparison, it's definitely been changed in this original movie to make it more of the most prominent main theme. So today we're going to go over the 2025 masterpiece, Frankenstein by Guillermo del Toro, because I think it's important to analyze this movie, really talk about what it really gets into, talk about the themes, not only about fatherhood and nature versus nurture, but also its themes of playing God, the themes of rejection, and how society can really mold someone. And then we're going to compare it to the book, and of course, finally, we're going to go over some individual scenes that I think really mold its unique opinion. So starting with the plot of the movie, it's actually really quite simple. So we start with a scene in the Arctic. We get introduced to the captain, who is an expedition captain, leading an expedition into Antarctica so that his people can just map out the world, basically. And the whole idea with the captain is that he's super overly ambitious and that his team is struggling because they're trying to break the ice around their ship so they can get free. And that's going to be a thing that'll be paid off way later in the movie, like literally the final scene. But the captain hears about a wreck later or farther down in the ice, and he sees a fire, and in that fire is the creature himself, who attacked a bunch of dogs and eventually left none other but Victor Frankenstein in the wreck. He's then saved by the captain and sent to the captain's quarters, where later the monster then again attacks but is subdued by getting shot into the ice. So the captain goes to the quarters, he meets up with Dr. Frankenstein, and they have a conversation. Basically, Frankenstein reveals that he created the monster. Who would have guessed? You know, it's almost like that's the name of the movie. And he decides to tell his tale on what the hell happened so that they got here. Frankenstein, or Victor as we're going to call him because that's his name, decides to start his story back at his childhood. Now, he talks about his relationship with his mother being his most sacred relationship, and also his association with red for her, which will be important later in the theme section of the book. But as we hear about his backstory, we hear about his abusive father, his background in medical history, his father allegedly letting his mother die to a simple disease, and eventually his father's like for his little brother, William. Now, William has a way more expanded role in the book, or in the movie compared to the book, which we'll go into later, but for now, we're going to talk about the rest of his backstory. So we see him grow up, and as his father later dies of old age, he eventually uses his wealth to go to college, leading us to our next scene. So the next scene starts in the university that Frankenstein goes to. We see him at a probationary hearing, basically, because while he's a good student, he's very defiant. And that's the main trait of Frankenstein, or Victor, not only in the novel, but in this movie. And it's a running theme within pretty much every type of Frankenstein media. Now we see Victor at this council trying to convince the other people that they should defy God with their science, which is pretty much a very Victorian theme, as you can see with this movie's background setting and world history. But Frankenstein decides that, you know, he wants to learn how to reanimate life because he loved his mother so much, and he feels that his biggest failure wasn't being able to save her, so he wants to bring her back, or at least learn to bring back the dead so that nobody else can die and, you know, hurt Frankenstein like it hurt to see his mother die. So he decides to make an experiment that we see in front of the tribunal where he brings back a dead man for just a few minutes. He uses these weird battery things that we'll see later in the movie. They aren't in the original book, but I do like the kind of steampunk-esque design that they do later on, especially in the tower, which we'll get into. But he uses these batteries and he reanimates basically a dead man, which is just a head, shoulders, a torso, and an arm. And so he has this little parlor show. He shows the thing catching a red ball, yet again symbolizing his mother, of course. And we see that the tribunal does not mess with it. You know, they say he's unholy, he's an affront to God, and that he's too ambitious. So Victor decides to just leave. He throws all of his work out and he runs away. But very importantly, someone who was watching that show was this guy named Air Harlander, who is a popular businessman who owns enough money to fund Frankenstein's work. And he eventually approaches Frankenstein, shows him a bunch of cool stuff, and basically says, "Hey, I'm friends with your brother. I'll introduce you to him and his fiance, and I want you to work for me to learn how to rebuild life." He basically offers him a bunch of picks between corpses of dead bodies from the wars and dead bodies from convicted criminals so that he can construct a monster or a creature or some sort of divine atom, which is also sort of a running theme in the book, which we'll mention later. You know, the whole creation and the comparison to the Bible and Adam and Eve. But we see Arlander offer this to Frankenstein, and he decides, after a little bit of thought, to take the deal. After deciding to take Harlander's money, Victor ends up meeting up with his younger brother and his fiancée Elizabeth. Now, with Elizabeth, he immediately kind of butts heads with her. They have an argument over morals and philosophy. That'll be a very important thing later on in the movie, as her and Frankenstein play a very important role in the creature's development. But as of now, he basically befriends her and he begins to like her, and he confesses to her, but she says no because she's marrying his brother, obviously. Now, this love triangle is a little bit unnecessary in the movie, but it's there, so I thought I'd mention it, of course. But either way, he bonds with his brother, he bonds with Harlander, he bonds with his soon-to-be sister-in-law later in the movie, and eventually, Victor goes to a tower that Arlander decided to buy out so that he can build the monster. So the tower gets fitted out with a bunch of shit. We get a bigger version of those batteries from earlier in the movie. And finally, Victor gets all his body parts, he stitches them together, and is ready to create the creature. As he's about to finish making the creature, finally able to achieve his dream of reviving life, Arlander basically goes crazy and begs Frankenstein to put his brain inside the creature so that he can be reborn as something immortal or beautiful. It's a really weird throwaway thing. This doesn't happen in the book at all either. It just kind of adds extra drama. But this scene happens and Arlander dies, but even though the experiment goes a little bit wrong and lightning goes crazy, you know, it's all dramatic, it bursts some of the batteries, it looks like the creature's a fail. And so Victor goes to sleep at night and he has a dream of this statue, by the way. I forgot to mention it earlier, but when he was younger, there was a statue in his room with red on it that he symbolized as his mother, and he'd have these prophetic dreams of the statue reaching out to him, telling him to go cure death or find a way to make life. And so he sees the statue reaching out to him. And finally, as he wakes up from the nightmare, he sees his creation. Now, his creation, of course, is played by Jacob Elordi. He's a great actor. He's from Euphoria, mainly, as a lot of people would know. Oscar Isaac is the one who plays Victor, another great actor. He's been in Moon Knight. He's been in a ton of things. I think Moon Knight's kind of the weirdest credit, but that's what I really like. I love Moon Knight. He's a great character. Made him in Rivals. The moon haunts you. But back on topic, we see the creature for the first time, and Victor is euphoric. He's like, oh my god, I did it. I created life. And he teaches the creature to say one word. That is his name, Victor. So, now that Victor actually made the monster, you're probably wondering, what the hell about Harlander? Well, that goes up immediately as Victor's brother and his fiance, his brother's fiance, not Victor's fiance like the book, decide to come back up to the tower to take, visit to Harlander. Because I forgot to mention this, but Harlander is Elizabeth's uncle, I believe, or cousin. So they are related, so she was worried about him. So they go to visit Victor, and Victor basically says, oh, Harlander's gone, blah, blah, blah. So they wander around a little bit. He shows them the ruined lab. And eventually, Elizabeth sneaks into the tunnels and sees the monster. She's scared at first, but the monster decides to show kindness to her, and they form a genuine connection. Some people say that this connection is based off of romantic love, and I can kind of see it due to a later scene, but I do want to mention now that I believe this connection is very much supposed to be a maternal one, so it'll be based off of a mother-son kind of thing. But it does get a little bit muddy in the end, and of course, this is Guillermo del Toro. He made Shape of Water. He loves the whole sympathetic monster thing, so it's possible this was a romantic one, or maybe even both in a weird Sigmund Freud kind of way. But as of my perspective, and which my original viewing saw, and my viewing for this video saw, it's more of a maternal connection. So either way, Elizabeth sees the monster, and she makes some sort of connection to it, and Victor finds out, and he gets mad at her, of course. And, of course, now that Elizabeth's seen it, he spills the beans, and he just says that the monster killed Harlander instead. And so he tells his brother and Elizabeth to leave. and he decides to pour a bunch of gasoline in the tower and blow it up. So he does that, and as his family decides to come rushing back on the last second because they feel something's gonna go wrong, the tower goes boom, with Victor right outside of it getting hit by a piece of debris in the leg, causing him to have to get a prosthetic later on. And this ends this half of the story with the monster screaming Victor's name as he's chained in the dungeon of the tower, about to be burned to death. So yeah, so that's about the first half of the movie, and as you can tell, it's really good. The shot composition is great, the themes are on point, and while it's not a straight one-to-one adaptation of the book, or even really a decent adaptation, honestly, it still kind of has the vibes that I was looking for in a movie, and I already enjoyed it. But then the movie hits you with a curveball. We cut back to the Arctic as the creature comes back, and he comes onto the ship, and he finally comes into the room to be face to face with his creator once again. And he hears that Victor has told his tale, his side of the story about what happened to the monster. And so, the creature decides to sit down, and we hear that he can talk. Yes, he did finally learn words, and he finally became intelligent like Victor wanted. I forgot to mention, Victor abuses the creature a lot, he beats it, he basically becomes his father. And so, the creature sits down, and we get the second half of this movie's story, The Creature's Tale. Now, The Creature's Tale starts right where Victor's tale ends, with him being in the burning building screaming Victor's name. And as he screams Victor's name, he keeps breaking out his chains, and eventually they break open and he goes down a drainage pipe that leads him down to a random forest in the middle of nowhere. He goes in the forest and he sees the beauty of nature for a minute before he's shot at by some hunters. He does actually get shot, I believe in the head or like the hand, and the wounds heal. That's some foreshadowing for the fact that the creature's invincible. And so the creature follows these hunters, or is chased by them, back to a shack where these hunters live with a little family. The creature decides to hide into an extra part of the shack that leads directly to the main building as he watches the family for months. From that, he starts to learn language and concepts of love and connection. And also from the hunters, basically what happens is that some wolves attack the hunter's base and it kills some of the sheep for the family. And so he learns the concept of the circle of life basically, and he realizes that the hunters don't hunt the wolves because they hate them, but because they want to protect what's theirs, and that the wolves don't hunt the sheep because they hate them. They're just trying to feed themselves. And so he learns about that and other morals and philosophy while watching the family. And eventually he decides that he likes these people and that he wants to help them out. So at night he gathers firewood and leaves it for them. He repairs their fences. He kills a wolf, I believe. No, that's later on, my bad. But either way, he grows a liking to the family, and the family see his acts of giving them wood and call him the spirit of the forest, especially this old blind guy who is the patriarch of the family. He doesn't have a name, so I'm just going to call him the old man for now. But basically, as winter approaches, the family decides to leave, and they leave the old man with a bunch of food and his own thing. And as the family leaves, Frankenstein decides that it's time to go into the family's building and make an appearance to the people that he loves so much, specifically the blind guy first, because he knows that he's scarred and grotesque, so he wants to make a good first impression with someone who wouldn't immediately hate him for how he looks. So he walks in the building pretending to be a traveler, and he gets close to the old man, and he asks for a friend. And so for the winter, him and the old man become really good friends. He starts to read books, he learns of actual philosophy, he learns to really write and read, and as he's talking to the old man, he ponders about his origin, and the old man tells him that he should go seek it out. And as Frankenstein is having these dreams, he decides that he must go back to where he originally came from. So he goes all the way back to the tower, and he finds some lab reports that Victor left for, or I guess he didn't leave, they were just unburned. And he finds the lab reports, and he finds a photo of him before his body was animated, and he realizes what he was. And as he comes back to the house, unfortunately, the wolves had gotten in and hurt the old man because he was defenseless. And as the creature holds the old man, his only friend, he truly feels lost for the first time. And of course, the old man, in his dying words, decides to tell the creature that he is a good man and that he can, be a decent person, that he isn't just the monster that he sees himself as. And as the old man finally dies, the hunters come back and see the creature with the body, and of course they assume that the creature killed him. And so after being shot, the creature kills one of the hunters and decides to leave the rest as he's too burdened with guilt to really care about killing them, rather just escaping because he doesn't want to end any more lives. So from there on, he decides to meet his creator. In the background, while the creature was chilling in the mountains, Victor and his brother have finally decided to get married. Not those two. They didn't get married. This isn't the book. The book has some weird, Victorian medieval era incest that I'll slightly point out later on. But in this, of course, William, Victor's brother, is getting married to Elizabeth finally. And Elizabeth and Victor have one final chat where she basically says that she wants Victor to not be in love with her anymore because, he revealed that earlier to her and she doesn't like that. She loves Victor's brother, William. And he's like, fine, I'll do that for you. And she's like, I still know you're lying. And I hope that one day you realize that you are. So as Victor goes back to his room, a little butthurt and sulking before the wedding, he sees that his window is open. And none other than the creature comes into the room. And the creature, finally making its reappearance, reveals to Victor that it has intelligence and that it can speak. And so the creature asks Victor one simple question: make me a companion. Victor's taken aback at first. Of course, he regrets making the creature, and it's cost him nothing but strife. It cost him his leg, it cost him Air Arlander, it cost a lot of things, and it's only brought him terrible hurt. And so, as the creature asks for a companion, Victor snaps. He says that the creature is a monster, a blot, something that isn't worth recreating, that he'd never do. And so the creature basically tells a little bit of its tale, saying that it really is a person, it can feel, it can think, and the creature realizes it can't die. And it wants someone to spend its life with because it doesn't want everything around it to die. So, the creature then tells Victor, if you don't make me a companion, I will kill you in my rage, because he says this really good line, and I'm going to say it in full, slightly paraphrased of course, but the line itself is, yeah, I don't remember it, but he basically says that he has a lot of love, but he also has rage inside of him, and his rage is infinite, and he will take it out on his creator if his creator doesn't grant his one wish. So as he throws Victor onto the bed and breaks off his prosthetic a little bit, the creature gets angry, and as he's about to finish off Victor, everyone in the wedding comes in the room and sees what has happened. And so Elizabeth tries to reason with the creature, recognizing him from all those years ago, but Victor decides to try and shoot at the creature while it's holding Elizabeth. And so Victor shoots Elizabeth. Whether this is purposeful or by accident, we don't know. But either way, Elizabeth is mortally wounded, and the creature cradles her in his arms and walks out, bringing her to a nearby cave where she dies. And I think one of the most beautiful scenes in the movie. Genuinely, the cinematography, the dialogue itself, it's amazing. The symbolism is so good. The character designs as well. I love Elizabeth's wedding dress in this movie. I'll probably have it up on screen. And of course, the creature's design as well. I love the coat. I love the shaggy long hair. This movie is a real looker. It's great to look at. And this scene really encapsulates that. I especially love the dialogue and how it's written. It really feels like that old-timey Victorian, Shakespearean type of dialogue that I really personally enjoy. Like, as a Game of Thrones fan, I really like that eloquent type of dialogue. So seeing that in this movie really, was something I enjoyed. So either way, Elizabeth dies as she tells the monster yet again that he's not a bad person. And, the monster is depressed, and Victor is angry. In the last section of the film, Victor decides to hunt down the monster himself, going down to the ends of the earth, finally finding him in Antarctica, using a shit ton of dynamite and guns to try and hunt the monster. But of course, it's too much, and he's overwhelmed by the monster, as we get back to the beginning of the film, where, of course, they find Victor in the fiery wreck of his camp and bring him on board the ship. And as we cut back, we see the final few scenes of the movie play, as Victor and the creature begin to reconcile. Victor, at his deathbed, realizes that the creature, to him, is basically his son, and the creature decides that it's time to finally forgive Victor. And so in this touching moment, they forgive each other, and Victor asks the monster one more thing before he dies, and that is to say his name like he said the first time all those years ago. And the monster decides that it's time to forgive his father, and does so, saying Victor one last time, as he then says, "Go live a nice life, my son," or about something like that. And the movie ends as the creature decides to walk off of the boat, frees the people, and the captain decides to make the decision to go home instead of giving into his hubris and continuing to hurt everyone by going north, which is, the cinematic parallel that I mentioned earlier. and the creature decides to just walk off into the sunset in one of the most beautiful shots of the movie, finally embracing the sun on his face, getting reconciliation from his creator, and deciding what to do next. So yeah, that's the plot of the 2025 movie. Now, of course, like any book adaptation, it is not perfect in any way, but I think it's a good movie, and I think it encapsulates some great themes that I personally enjoy. Of course, in this section, we're going to go over some quick book and movie differences so you can kind of understand what differences there are in, the book and the film, and why I like this as an adaptation so much rather than just a direct translation. Now, the first comparison starts literally at the beginning, as the expedition in Antarctica is written from the perspective of letters by the captain sent back to people on the mainland. And in these letters, he mentions that he longs for a friend or someone to understand his ambition. And of course, that's supposed to be a parallel to the monster or the creature himself. And as well as that, right at the beginning, we also find out in the book that Victor's family is really good, and Elizabeth is actually adopted by their family. In the original version, she's his cousin, and in the re-released version, they just call each other cousin, but they adopt Elizabeth, and Victor and Elizabeth do end up getting married. Also, William exists in the original book, but he's much younger, and he's killed by the creature later on by accident. Also, in addition, there is a friend named Henry of Victor, who is basically what William serves in the original movie. So yeah, a lot of the family dynamics change, and of course this changes Frankenstein and his creature's plot as well, and completely overhauls the themes of the original movie and the book. So in addition to that, the creature learns to read and write just by watching the family instead of being directly taught by the old man. And in addition, he doesn't kill the old man or the family. He just, as soon as he reveals himself to the old man is nice to him, but then the family breaks in and gets mad at the monster, and so he leaves in his rage without killing anybody. Also, in general, the creature is a murderer in the book. He kills a lot of people just to get to Frankenstein so that Frankenstein can confront him and he can ask his wish of getting a thing. And finally, of course, the main thing is that the creature finds Victor already dead, so he doesn't get that reconciliation, and he doesn't get to acknowledge Victor as his father. So yeah, there's a lot of different weird comparisons between the book and the movie, and of course, each stand on their own as great pieces of media. The original novel is a classic, of course, and this movie, I think, is a modern-day classic. And while this adaptation does fail in a lot of ways, I think the things that it does bring out make it its own unique thing. Like I said, Elizabeth is expanded. In the book, she's just killed by the creature to get to Victor, but in the movie, she becomes a sort of mother figure. And of course, that's the main thing, and that's pretty much what Guillermo del Toro does. He puts in his own directorial influence to make this movie what it is, and not just a straight adaptation. He uses his very popular trope of the sympathetic monster to build up the creature as, like I said, a sympathetic monster, someone who really is a person. And of course, while that theme is in the book as well, it's more about how someone who is just born into this world, who could be pure, as we see with the family, ends up not becoming pure because the world rejects him. The family rejects him as soon as he reveals himself and tries to make a friend. Victor rejects him when he asks to make a friend, and when he finally finds Victor to beg once again, Victor is dead. So that's where I think these two parts differ. The original is more about morality and, of course, the life and death and remaking life thing, while this, of course, is about the morality, and it does ponder that, especially with the creature's monologue about the wolves and the hunters, but it focuses mainly on fatherhood and really the idea of bringing something into this world and how it is and how you should treat it. So yeah, that's my little tirade about the book comparisons, and let's get on to some individual scenes that I think are very important to understanding the film's themes. So the first important scene, of course, I say scene in quotes because it's not really one scene, but rather the entire opening section of Victor's tale, is, in my opinion, also a very important part of the story, and that is his relationship with his father. As we see, his father usually favors his brother William over him, and before even William was born, we see that his father was very abusive, forcing him to learn medicine at a very young age and being very strict with it, making sure he was perfect in every way. And of course, this will eventually be reflected into the creature as Victor, he treats the creature terribly. He immediately expects this basically 1-year-old that he just birthed to understand complex things. All it's able to say when it's originally born is just Victor's name. And Victor immediately, as soon as the creature isn't showing any signs of intelligence, he just abuses it. He yells at it, he chains it up in the basement, he hits it even with the same sort of fire poker thing that his father hit him with. And this shows, of course, the cycle of abuse and familial trauma. Even though Victor, especially when he's retelling the tale to the captain, says that he hates his father and he hates that kind of man, we see that Victor became that kind of man, unfortunately. And so that's the first important parallel and the first important scene that I wanted to bring to light as we continue to mention the story. So the first scene I want to go over is Victor's first interaction with the creature, or the creature's birth, as you can call it. So it starts with Victor having visions of the statue in his dreams until he's woken up by the creature at the foot of his bed. Now, the cinematography is very important in this scene, as before Victor and the creature speak to each other, they're not shown in the same shot. They're both parallel to each other, looking at each other through the blinds of the bed, trying to figure out what each other is. Victor wondering if he is in a dream, seeing his creature finally come to life, and the creature itself literally just gaining sentience as it was just born a minute ago, and wondering what the hell he's looking at. And so as Victor approaches it with a soft voice, he says, "Same." And as he does that, he touches the creature for the first time, and he realizes that this is real. This is his thing. He finally, after all of this time, has achieved life. And so he goes to, and he opens the blinds, and as the score swells, it's a very light score. It's almost wonderful in a way. Like, it's very awe-inspiring. Like, Victor finally did it. He made this creature. He's happy. He did it. And as he opens the blinds, the score swells, and we hear the leitmotif that's very more used throughout the movie. If you don't know what a leitmotif is a type of musical sort of term that basically means a repeated section of notes. So, for example, in Avengers, the leitmotif is the fucking doo-doo, doo-doo, doo-doo. You know, that's in all four of the movies. It's in Civil War. It's a leitmotif across all the Marvel movies because it's the Avengers theme. So if something Avengers happens, they're going to play it. And in Frankenstein, of course, it has its own leitmotif. And I'm not going to I can't kind of hum it the same way I can with the Avengers theme, but if you watch the movie, you'll recognize it instantly. And it's played a lot. And we hear it in this scene as he opens the blinds. And we also get some of that father-son symbolism, as when he opens it, he says, "Son, son." He's talking about the son, literally. But he's also talking about the creature. You know, we see that this is his son. He's sort of trying to accept. He's like, "Oh my gosh, this is my son. I think I like it." He shows the creature the son. He's like, this is a life. He's not only talking about the son itself, too. He's talking about his achievement. He created the creature, the son, his own son. And he's like, "This is life. I've created life." So you can see just with the dialogue itself, there's very much this father's son, this bringing something into the world symbolism. And finally, of course, we get to him coming towards the creature. And he says, "Victor, can you say that?" And the creature says his name, Victor. And he is in awe. For the first time, he has created something. He's made his accomplishment. He's made the son, his son. And he has brought back life. And that is a very euphoric thing for Victor. But as we can see later, things go down south immediately. So, after Victor creates the creature, he introduces himself to it. He says that's his son. Victor starts to become frustrated with the creature. It's not super smart. It's very bumbling. It doesn't listen to his commands. It's not able to find another word. And so Victor begins to abuse it. He starts hitting it with the same sort of fire poker that he did, or that his father hit him with. And he becomes very unsatisfied with it. And of course, this drives him later to killing the monster. But in comparison to his cruel reaction to the creature, as the creature doesn't live up to his expectations, similar to how he didn't live up to his father's expectations, Elizabeth meets the creature, and she is tender to it again. She goes down to the sewers, and she sees the creature, and while she's scared at first, she comes closer to it, and it gives her a leaf. It shows her kindness, and she says, "A leaf for me." It's a very tragic line considering that she dies later on, along with the creature, but of course, she tries to teach the creature her name. She says, "Elizabeth, can you say that?" And so the creature struggles, but as she leaves, it finally learns how to say her name, Elizabeth. And that cements that second bond that the creature has. His bond with his sort of mother, and in some people's interpretation, romantic figure, Elizabeth. Though I tend to stick to the interpretation that Elizabeth is a mother figure, because her scene quite literally parallels the figure, or the scene, where Victor dubs himself the father of the creature. You know, he calls the creature his son, showing him the sun, telling him to face it in the earlier scene. And now, in a parallel, this scene is more dark, it's in the dungeon. So it's literally opposite of the first scene. The first scene is in the top of the tower in Victor's quarters. You know, it's all bright and dreary. We have this great score. And while in Elizabeth's scene, it's at the bottom of the tower, it's in the dungeons, the creature is chained up. We have this slightly sad score as the creature, despite being in such a sorrowful predicament, it comes to Elizabeth and it gives it a gift, and Elizabeth accepts that. And basically, the creature imprints on it, and she becomes its mother. The next important scene, I think, that I should mention is the whole sequence with the family, and specifically the old man. Now, this goes more into the theme of nature versus nurture. As we see, the creature is quite dumb originally. It doesn't know how to speak besides the words Victor and Elizabeth, and because of that, Victor abandons it, despite Elizabeth showing it kindness. Now, finally, after the creature is burnt up and sent out of the building, he is in the wilderness and he meets the family, or at least spies on them. And once he meets the old man, he develops his first relationship with a friend. He learns how to talk, and like I said earlier in the scene where he describes the wolves and the hunters' relationships, he learns about morals, and he learns more about it as he continues to read. And I think this scene is very unique. This shows that despite everything, the creature, even though he was horribly abused, can show kindness. He showed it to Elizabeth, he's shown it to the old man. He's realizing that he may not just be a monster, despite when he goes back to the tower and finds out that he was just, for lack of a better word, a Frankenstein of other people's parts. But despite all that, the old man still accepts him, telling him that he's a good man in his dying words. But of course, in another thing that's very symbolic earlier on, as we see, the wolves kill the old man, and of course the hunters kill Frankenstein, or try to, and of course they don't mean to. They think that he hurt their father, or the old man, whatever he is, their father, their grandfather. But we see a reflection of this cycle of violence. You know, the creature tries to reach out, he almost gets something good, but despite that, something tragic happens and he has to move on. And so this kind of mirrors his earlier interactions with Victor and Elizabeth. He's born, something nice happens, but then something truly tragic happens, and this becomes his tipping point. He leaves, and he realizes the one thing he must do is confront his father and ask for a partner, because that's what he needs. He can't die. He knows that the people around him will die despite his best efforts, so he needs something more. Now, this scene, in my opinion, or this sequence of the movie, is a really good sequence. It shows the whole nature versus nurture theme perfectly, as the monster is nurtured and he becomes a good person. He genuinely wants to help, and you can even see that in the next scene with Victor, as he asks Victor to create someone like him, and Victor says, "Another monster, I would never." And then the creature says, "We could be monsters together." It shows that the creature, despite it still being knowledgeable, it's smart now, it can read, it can talk, it still is a child. It's only a few years old, and it just says we can be monsters together. It's a very sad line. It's very childish. He doesn't know truly what monster means. He just wants another person like him. But despite all of that, he's still rejected by the thing that he was created by. And so, of course, Victor abandons the creature, and the creature ends up being nurtured in a world that, despite showing him kindness, always ends up with cruelty in the end. So with that, he decides to be cruel, and he decides to injure Victor. And eventually, that causes the only other good thing that was still in his life, Elizabeth, dying. And this, yet again, shows the horrible cycle that the creature is stuck in this adaptation of the book. Okay, and now for the second to last sequence I want to analyze, that being the sequence where Victor and the creature hunt each other. And so this sequence is very important because it shows yet again the cycle of violence between the Frankenstein family. Originally, we have Charles Dance playing Victor's father, who is abusive towards Victor, and Victor, despite hating his father, ends up being abusive towards the creature. And the creature, who yet again ends up hating his father for not granting his wish of a companion, becomes abusive towards Victor. So we see that big cycle of violence as each generation becomes more abusive to each other. And it culminates in, of course, Victor trying to blow up his creation, killing his son, or at least attempting to. But of course, the creature survives and still tries to torment Victor. And finally, the last scene of the movie is Victor and the creature's reunion and reconciliation. This yet again punctuates the theme of the cycle of violence and the acceptance of fatherhood and nature versus nurture in this movie, as despite all of the violence, besides all of the tragedy that has been in the creature's life, the creature finally decides to accept Victor as his father. Instead of continuing the cycle started by Tywin Lannister, or, Charles Dance, or Victor's father, the elder Frankenstein, he decides, finally, in this one last moment, he grants his father's kindness and decides to call him by the name Victor. It's a very somber scene. It's a great scene, like I said earlier. And of course, this punctuates the themes of the movie perfectly. As you can see, you can't see each other in the I can't speak. I'm sorry, but as you can tell, they're not in the same shot in the scene until the creature decides to go on Victor's bed and get closer to them. And as they get closer, we hear the theme swell yet again. And in the somber scene, they finally fully say goodbye to each other. And as the creature leaves, he is able to free the people, yet again showing the parallel between Victor's hubris and the captain, who yet again echoes that hubris as he goes, "Oh, no, we have to keep going north despite all the people it's hurting." But after hearing the creature and Victor's tale, he's like, "Let's head back. These people have families, they want to go back." Which is actually a funny thing because, like I said earlier in the book, the captain sort of parallels the creature, as the captain wants a companion to share his ambition. But in the movie, his ambition is sort of a parallel for Victor. So I think that's a funny thing that shows kind of how these adaptations are day and night. One focuses on rather the nature of evil, while the other focuses on the departure from evil, that despite all of your suffering, you can still choose to be the better person. And we see that exactly through the creature as he decides to end the cycle of violence between the fathers of his family and becomes a better man and goes off quite literally into the sunset to choose a new life. So yeah, that is my analysis of Guillermo del Toro's 2025 film Frankenstein. This film, despite only seeing it about 3 times, has been very near and dear to my heart. I enjoy the original novel, and while this movie does have a lot more differences than I originally thought, I think it is a great adaptation. It takes the source material, it takes a lot of the themes, the setting, and while Guillermo del Toro changes it to be part of his own perspective and he uses his own film language with his whole sympathy for the monster trope, his theme about fatherhood, he uses his own things to adapt it, but that is what stories should be. Stories shouldn't just be retelling the same thing over and over. Everyone should be allowed to add their own spin to it, and I think this movie does that perfectly. It changes the original story while still having its own identity and theme, but using its own stuff. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for watching. If you watched all of this to the end, make sure to subscribe if you like this type of content. I enjoy making this type of content. I like making reviews. I'd love to do reviews for more movies that I enjoy. And this is your, actually, I've done, last video I did was like 6 months ago. So this is the fastest I've been uploading for like 4 years. Isn't that funny? But I still have college, so I'll try to upload as much as I can. Whenever I feel like I want to do a little pet project, I will do it. But yeah, thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Appreciate it.